Welcome to part 3 of Golf Equipment 101. Today, we are going to talk about golf shafts. Like I said, today we're talking about golf shafts. So we're going to do a couple of things that have to do with that. First off, we're going to figure out how you can identify the type of golf shaft, whether you have graphite or you have steel. Then we're going to go over the parts of the golf shaft, so starting at the top all the way down to the bottom and what everything in the middle means. Then we're going to figure out how to identify the flex of the shaft and the weight of the shaft. We're also going to talk about how those things can affect how you play golf. So, buckle up, let's get to learning. All right, like I said, we are identifying golf shafts, and I got a couple out for us today to kind of take some looks at and help you figure out what we're talking about here. So first thing we are going to talk about is how to identify whether you have a steel or a graphite shaft. So this right here is a graphite shaft. Now, the easiest way to tell in plain and simple English is graphite shafts are usually painted. Right, there's some kind of design, some kind of paint on them so that you can identify exactly what it is. It has some cool features on it, some shimmer, things like that that really give it this cool look. So graphite shafts are painted. If they weren't, then they'd have this kind of weird black rings. It doesn't look good, right? So graphite golf shafts are typically going to be painted. For more proof of that, I actually use graphite in my irons. So let me move that wood shaft here. And you can see this right here is built for my irons. So it's a little bit shorter, but it's not steel. It's painted, so it's graphite. Now, we'll go over some of the benefits of graphite, some of the disadvantages of graphite, as well as with steel a little bit later. So let's move on. And then figure out how do we identify a steel shaft. I'm going to hold on to that before it falls. All right, so what we do when we are identifying a steel shaft is pretty easy. You just look for the rolled steel rod coming out of the club. It's obviously more complicated than just calling it a rolled steel rod. But overall, when you're trying to identify the two and figure out if you have graphite or you have steel, the one that's made out of steel and feels metallic and kind of has that metallic sound to it, that's going to be a steel shaft. Everything else that's painted is going to be much more of a graphite shaft. So let's move on and go through the parts of the golf shaft from the top to the bottom and anything in between, and then we will continue to move on. Okay, so when we start trying to identify the parts of the shaft, we start at the very top. Right? And this right here is called the butt end of the golf shaft. So that's the butt. Then as we go down the shaft, we keep going, we keep going, we keep going until we reach this part called the tip. So the tip of the club, the tip of the shaft is what goes down into the golf club head, which we'll get into next week. So you got butt end here. You got tip here. You got the tip end down there. Now, what's all this in the middle? We're probably wondering. What is all of this? So that is called the midsection, and we will talk about that when we talk about flex of the club. So the top, where you would hold it, where you put the grip on, is called the butt section. And if you ever hear anything about the tip of the shaft, that's the very bottom. All right, so now that we've identified what type of golf shaft we have, whether it's steel or it's graphite, let's talk about some of the benefits of each type. Okay, so graphite golf shafts, okay? Ones that are painted, ones that are made with carbon fiber, rolled glass. There's graphite in here, carbon fiber, that glass that helps give it a little bit of flexibility. It's a really soft thing. What these are for is these are typically used. Now, like I said, I am somebody who uses graphite in the irons, but you will typically find graphite in your fairway woods, in your drivers, things like that. So they are lighter weight. As a general rule, they are lighter weight. They are a little bit softer, but they are what's going to be used to give you the most speed. You can do a lot more with graphite than you can steel in terms of flexibility and flex and weight and things like that. You can actually make a very, very lightweight, stiff shaft in graphite if you absolutely wanted to. Most people don't, but you can. So you can do a lot more with this than you can a steel shaft. Now, from there, graphite in irons, they're a little bit shorter, a little bit heavier. But again, you can see they're kind of painted. Some have kind of a reflective finish that looks like steel, but it's not. It's actually an ion plating that's done with vacuums and molecules and things like that. But you can get graphite for your irons. Like I said, you can get really lightweight while maintaining stiffness, and that's really important when it comes to irons. Now, what are steel shafts typically used for? Steel shafts you're going to find mainly in wedges, and you're going to find them mainly in iron sets. The reason being is they're very consistent. Everybody has played with the steel shaft pretty much their entire life in their irons. Most people don't venture away from what they know. You're going to find these on used sets everywhere that you look. You'll find them mainly on new sets. Another added benefit of steel is cheaper. So if you're going to buy a new set of golf clubs, the graphite set's going to run you about $100 more, just as a general rule. Again, I don't speak in absolutes around here, but as a general rule, that's kind of what you're going to find. Okay, so now that we've talked about the different types of shafts, steel and graphite, we've talked about some of their uses and some of their benefits. You're probably asking, which one should I use? Now, it's all really a personal decision. I actually worked for a graphite golf shaft company for a while, so I have my own feelings on this. I know what graphite can do, so I'm a huge proponent of graphite golf shafts. Now, I also know a lot of people who couldn't imagine playing graphite in their irons. But as a general rule, everybody plays with graphite in their woods. So if you're looking for a driver, fairway wood, a hybrid, you're most likely going to find a graphite shaft in that. So don't steer away from it from there. Now, a lot of people like consistency and a certain feel and heaviness to their irons. I have figured out how to get that without needing a really heavy shaft. And so what that means is I use graphite, but those people prefer steel, and I won't knock steel at all. In fact, I have a whole set of clubs that have steel in them, and when I took them out to go hit them, I didn't hate it. So don't be afraid of either one. There is no right answer. Find what feels best for you. Some people like the way steel feels. Some people like the way graphite feels. Some people don't like the way steel feels, and they hate how graphite feels. So what does that mean? They go with steel. Right? So find what's right for you. What we want to make sure is that we get the right flex and the right weight for you. And to go deeper into that, let's go. All right, so as you've started shopping for golf equipment, or maybe you've clicked around on some websites and just tried to learn a little bit about what you should buy, kind of look and see what's out there, you've probably seen this thing called shaft stiffness. Now, that can be very confusing for some people because there's a lot of options. So let's go through those options, tell you what they are, and tell you what they measure, okay? Now, there is no one universal standard for what a different flex is. A stiff in one company's shaft could be a regular in another. A Japanese spec is typically much softer than an American spec or a North American spec, right? A Japanese stiff is typically a North American regular. So these things can make a difference, and so you want to make sure that you can kind of feel it out, or you learn a little bit about a brand and figure out what you like. But as some general rules, let's go through what the different flexes are, what they mean, and when and which one is going to be right for you. Again, these are general rules. I don't want you to think that I'm speaking in absolutes here. There are a lot of things that can go into finding the right flex, but these are good starting points. The first thing we're going to talk about is the different names of the flexes. Okay, we're going to start at the most flexible, the softest, and we're going to move to something in the firmest. Okay, so let's start there with an L flex. Now, what does an L flex stand for? L stands for ladies flex. Now, I don't like always saying this, but as a general rule, again, I don't speak in absolutes, but as a general rule, ladies don't swing the clubs as fast as men do. That's not a knock or anything like that. It's just kind of one of those facts. So, ladies flex clubs tend to be shorter because ladies are shorter, and they tend to be very soft. Okay, so that shaft is going to flex very easily. It's not going to take a lot of pressure. It's not going to be very hard to bend. Okay? So from a ladies flex, we move up to our next step. Our next step is a senior flex. Sometimes an SR flex is what it'll be. Sometimes you'll see it as an A flex. All right. Now, A flex stands for amateur flex, but honestly, 99% of people are amateurs. The PGA Tour and people who play professionally, they get custom fit for their stuff. But an A flex is an amateur flex. I hate that name. We all in the industry pretty much call it a senior flex, okay? This is for older folks or people who don't swing as fast. Maybe they swing a little bit faster than a lady does, but overall, they're pretty slow swings. We're talking somebody who tops out at 80, 85 miles an hour with their driver, not going to be hitting the ball very far. All right, so the next flex from senior flex is going to be an R flex. An R flex stands for a regular flex. A regular flex is for somebody who swings about 90 upwards to 100 miles an hour with their driver shaft. Okay, so it's going to take a little bit to bend that shaft for that shaft to properly load and get the proper energy transfer. Most people could probably play an R flex, so don't be afraid of an R flex. A lot of people also have a little bit of an ego and think that they need something stiffer than they actually do. We usually, like I said, see these top out at about 100 miles an hour swing speed. So if you're under 100 miles an hour and you're at about 90, maybe 95, somewhere in there, you could be an R flex player and get the maximum transfer of energy. That way that shaft is flexing and unloading for you properly. So after we move on from an R flex, we move into an S flex or a stiff flex. This is probably the most popular shaft on the market. You see these everywhere, an S flex shaft. Most men golfers at least tell themselves they are an S flex, but most golfers have an S flex in their club. You're going to find mostly S's and R's on used clubs, okay? This one, for instance, is an S flex. It actually says F4 on it because that's how this company identifies their S flex. But most of the time, you're going to see an S next to it, and what that S does is that tells you it's a stiff flex. So from there, we move on to what we call a XS. You'll see an XS or an X stiff, something like that, and that is simply an extra stiff shaft. An extra stiff shaft is for somebody who swings 105 miles an hour over. Most of the time, these are going to be better players, younger guys who swing it off the charts, who can hit the ball really far. If they play something like an R flex, it's going to move too much. It's not going to be very stable for them, and they're going to run into issues with too much spin, too much launch, things like that. So now that we've covered all the different types of flexes that you're pretty much going to run into, you could run into some others, but they're very few and far between. So you really want to focus on these main flexes. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I know what my swing speed is, right? I said if you play a regular flex, you're going to be somewhere from 90 to 100. A stiff flex is going to be from 100 to 105, and an extra stiff is 105 and over. How do you know which one of these you should be playing? And that's a great question. The best and easiest way to figure out your swing speed is to go to a golf store. Most of the time they have a simulator that measures those kind of things for you. Now, those things aren't always the most accurate in the world. I mean, most of the time if you go into a PGA Tour Superstore, you're not hitting on a TrackMan or a really nice Foresight that's going to give you all the top level knowledge. But it's going to give you a good base and give you a good starting point. So don't be afraid to walk into those stores, ask somebody, ask for help, and then let them kind of guide you a little bit. But these are the general rules. If you find yourself swinging 100 miles an hour and the guy recommends an extra stiff shaft, you know you're going to want to ask a couple of extra questions, right? So what are some of those questions you should ask? Typically, he's looking for a launch window or a spin rate that you want to go for. This can also be affected by the club head, and we'll definitely get deeper into this in a later video. But know that there are reasons why you don't follow those guidelines, but as a general rule, like I said, those are the guidelines you're going to want to follow. All right, so now we've figured out what weight is, what flex is, which can be really confusing. Now that we know what those two terms are, let's figure out how can we identify these things on a golf shaft. So on a steel shaft, it's actually pretty easy. Most steel shafts just have a sticker that start at the butt end, right? We talked about the butt end. And it's just below the butt end. So this one, for example, you can see is going to give us quite a bit of information. This is the shaft band. If you don't see this on here, there are other ways to get this information, but this is definitely the easiest way to get this information. So let's start here. You can tell a lot about this club just off this little piece of this little sticker right here. So first off, we have a true temper. You can see it actually says true temper. Then I have a dynamic. You can see it says dynamic gold. Okay, so that tells me I'm looking at a true temper dynamic gold shaft. All right, so now how do we figure out the shaft and the weight? Well, if we keep turning this sticker, so you see here, we keep turning this sticker, and what do we see? It's going to say S300 right there. You can actually see that, S300. Okay, so now I know that I have a dynamic gold, a true temper, dynamic gold, S300. Okay, so with that, we can figure out a lot about this club. So I have the S. S is typically for stiff. So I have an S and I have a 300. Now, what the heck does 300 mean? Now, in the dynamic golds, 300 is kind of the weight classification. It doesn't weigh 300 grams, but it's a weight for you to tell. They make an S200. They make an S400 as well. 400 is going to be heavier than the 3 heavier than the 2, etc. So then a quick, simple Google search is going to give me all the information I need about that. Now, where we get a little complicated is going to be in graphite shafts. Graphite shafts, this information can be scattered all over the place. It could be caught up in the design. You can lose it somewhere. It can be in small print. It can be wrapped around the club. But here's going to be a general rule for you. On a graphite shaft, you are going to start at the butt end up here, or where the grip is, and you're just going to work your way down to figure out things about this shaft, right? So here, I keep going. Okay, I have a Pro Force 20 or double X 65. Okay, so if I put that in the system, I may get some information, right? If I put that into Google, I may get some information. Okay, so I move down here, and I see this little band here that says UST Mamiya. Okay? UST Mamiya. Okay, so now, before I go any further, I have a Pro Force double X 65 from UST Mamiya. Okay, so now let's keep going down. All right, so now I have gold stabilized design. Stabilized design. Okay, so I can put that into Google as well. And then here it says 6F4. Okay, so we don't really know what that means. So let's go Google here. We go Proforce, XX, 65, US Team Mamiya Gold, Stabilized Design, 6F4. Now my experience with this shaft tells me quite a bit. I know what a 6F4 is. But I can look here and I go 6, that's probably 60 gram. But what the heck is this F4? Well, I know US Team Mamiya doesn't use A, R, S, X, things like that. They use a numbering system. They go F2, F3 is regular, F4 is stiff, F5 is extra stiff. That's just some general information. But I know here that I have a Proforce 20, 65, gold, 6F4. If I put that into Google, it's probably going to take me to the US Team Mamiya website, and I'm going to be able to get quite a bit of info on this shaft. So with graphite, it's a little bit harder. You got to kind of work your way down. You got to look for these little things here. They're going to try and throw some extra words in here. They're going to tell you about the technology in it. There's some that'll say like VeloCore, or they'll say stabilized tip design and things like that. And that's perfectly fine. That's just them telling you what technology is in the shaft. But if you Google the manufacturer, US Team Mamiya, and you Google the name of the shaft, so it'll say like, there's one from Mitsubishi. It'll say Mitsubishi Chemical Company. Well, I know that's not the name of the shaft, that's a company. All right, and then I'll look up Tensei, Tensei. Well, now I have a lot of information on the Mitsubishi Tensei. And then I can say 70S. Okay, well, now I got the weight, I got the stiffness, I got all of that. So that's how you identify these things. Google's your friend, okay? So just work your way from the butt end all the way down till you run out of words. And just Google every single word on here and you will know everything you want to about that shaft. All right, so now that we know flex, we know weight, and we know how to identify these things on the golf shaft, let's move on to some brands that you may see and brands that are high quality brands in the golf shaft industry. Let's start with steel iron shafts. So the first and biggest brand you're going to see in used clubs, if you go shopping for used clubs or anything like that, probably the most popular brand from the 1970s to today is going to be Dynamic Gold. Dynamic Gold, True Temper Dynamic Gold is the rock solid base of the True Temper lineup. True Temper does have a bunch of shafts in their lineup. They have the Elevate, they have the Dynamic Gold, they have Dynamic Gold Tour Issue. They have a bunch of things that fall under their umbrella, but True Temper Dynamic Gold is going to, I hate to say this because it's kind of a cliche, but it's the gold standard. When it comes to steel shafts, they've been around forever, and they are a great design. They come in an R flex, which is an R, and then it goes the weight, which is a 1, 2, 300. The S is the stiff, and from there you have an S300. They make an S200 and an S400 as well. And that's going to be their stiff lineup as you mess around with weights, things like that. Third, they have an X Flex, which is going to be an X100. You can see some X others. They make an X7. They make an X100. They make a bunch of different types. But the X100 is going to be the thing you see the most on a Dynamic Gold. The next brand is actually owned by True Temper as well. They are a company called Project X. They used to be owned by a company named FST, but I'm fairly certain Project X got bought by True Temper. So Project X is actually a flighted design they have. We'll go into that in Golf Shaft 201, but they actually don't have any steps on them. It's a one-piece rolled piece of steel. They're a very popular brand. They don't use the typical RSX Flex. They actually use numbers. So a 5.0 is a regular. A 5.5 is, some people say it's a stiff, some people will say that it's a stiff regular. Okay, so maybe it's between the two. Then a 6.0, everyone generally agrees is a stiff. And then when we go into a 6.5, we're talking an extra stiff. And a 7 is really extra stiff, okay? So that's kind of the rating system for True Temper. True Tempers are actually really good. I love the way True Tempers feel. I don't know if I like them more than a Dynamic Gold, but I do really like Project X. Every time that I have put them in a club, I top notch. All right, the third brand that I want to talk to you about when it comes to steel iron shafts is a brand called KBS. KBS is actually, I would say, probably the second most popular brand in the world right now. KBS is easily noticeable by their red stickers. So all of their shafts have these black and red stickers. If you see the red label, you know more than likely you're looking at a KBS shaft. KBSs are actually counterweighted, which means they're a little bit heavier in the hands than a normal shaft, and that just helps with swing weight. Again, that'll go into the Golf Shaft 201 series that I plan on doing, but know that they're a little bit counterweighted. They may feel a little bit weirder in the hands. You may feel it in your hands a little bit more. One problem I do see with KBS is that the tips of the shafts will actually bend. That they're very soft in the tip, and that gives them this very nice, soft, smooth feeling. But the problem with that is when you hit the ball and you hit that club into the ground a lot, what happens? Those tips get weakened and they bend. So people will actually go in to get their clubs reshafted, or maybe they're noticing a club feels a little weird. They take it in and then they pull the club head and they go, oh my God, you need a whole new shaft. So be aware of that with KBSs. It's not a huge problem, but it's definitely a problem that we do run into. Okay, so now that we've talked about steel shafts, let's go on and move on and look at graphite iron shafts. Now, my personal favorite graphite iron shaft is a recoil. Okay, recoils. This one is a one-off. I had some connections there, and I was able to get this painted and have a one-off set. Recoils are graphite all the way through, so they're really nice, really high quality. I can't say enough good things about the Recoil brand. I absolutely love it. I just recently shot my lowest score ever. I tied my lowest score with Recoil shafts. So you are going to see a lot of good stuff from them. Now, recoils, most recoils have what's called an IP finish. So it's an ion-plated finish that looks like steel, but it's very obvious that it's not. Recoils come in a wide variety of weights and series. So the Recoil has the 400 series, they have a 700 series, they have their 85, 95, 110, 125, and then they have all those in prototypes as well. And all that is different ball flights, ball characteristics, but every single one of them is ion plated except for, I want to say, one of them. So recoil means ion plating, very high quality, very high-end graphite golf shaft. Another brand that you're going to see a lot in iron shafts is Project X. Project X is new to the graphite iron shaft game. I want to say that they are pretty new. They have come in and kind of taken the world by storm a little bit. They partnered with True Temper, and True Temper has been going all in on those recently. You're not going to see Dynamic Gold, but you will see other True Temper brands come out as a graphite shaft. So be aware, you have UST Mamiya Recoil, and you're going to have True Temper for the graphite iron shafts. You'll also see steel fibers. Steel fibers are very high-end golf shafts, graphite golf shafts. Why they're called steel fibers, though, is it has steel. So you get that consistency and that feel of steel with some of the benefits of the graphite iron shaft. The lighter weight, the stiffness qualities, things like that. All right, so that about covers it for iron shafts. Let's move on to graphite wood shafts. So graphite wood shafts, there's a wide variety of brands and companies that offer these golf shafts. The most popular brand going right now is going to be Mitsubishi Chemical. Mitsubishi, yes, like the car, same parent company, things like that, are offering a lot of really good shafts right now. Their most popular being the Tensei. That's Tensei. Those come in 3 different models. I want to say right now it's a blue, a white, and an orange. And those are different launch profiles, so high, medium, low launch, different spin profiles, things like that. You'll see those a lot on tour. Another big brand is going to be Fujikura. Fujikura is stock in a lot of things. You see them work a lot with TaylorMade, work a lot with Callaway as well on their stock graphite shafts. Right now, Fujikura has the Ventus, which is their high-end $300 golf shaft. You'll find the Ventus on some TaylorMade drivers, but it's not the same. Uses different materials, same paint job, same pretty much everything, except for the materials are less high-end, plain and simple. Another brand that I'm partial to is UST Mamiya. You see those on, right now they have the Helium shaft that's actually very popular, especially in lightweight women's and softer flexes. That Helium is a high moving shaft for them. They have the Link, which is a nice, really cool looking shaft. A lot of people say good things about it. Not a ton of tour played, not a lot of stock options there, but a very good shaft nonetheless. So we got Fujikura, we got Mitsubishi Chemical, we got UST. I'm trying to think, who else do we have? I can't think anybody off the top of my head that you may run across. You may see some True Temper stuff. Oh, Project X. Project X is killing it right now, actually. I can't believe I forgot them. Project X is coming out with some very, very, very cool stuff in their hazardous line. That's HZDUSDRUS, something like that. They are really going hard in that line. They have the hazardous smoke. They have the hazardous red, yellow. They got a bunch of really cool shafts coming down the pipe from them. I think for the U.S. Open, they came out with a really cool red, white, and blue stars and stripes shaft that is actually a whole new formulation of a shaft for them. Okay, so now that we're done, we've gone over everything you need to know about golf shafts. I hope and pray that you can go to a store right now and not have to ask somebody, what does this R mean on the shaft? This says 6R. What does that mean? I hope you don't have to ask that anymore. If you do and you still have questions, leave them in the comments section below. I'll gladly answer them whenever I see them pop up. In the meantime, until you figure that out, follow me on social media. You're going to find me on Twitter at TheGreenFee1. You'll find me on Instagram at TheGreenFee. You'll find me on Facebook. If you search The Green Fee, I'll pop up there. I'm obviously here on YouTube. And if you go to Apple, iTunes, anywhere you find your podcast, I also do a weekly podcast on there as well, talking about new releases that companies are coming out with. We got some cool series going on there. Hopefully I got a couple of nice interviews lined up. Follow me, like, subscribe it. If you have any questions, leave them below. Hit them straight, folks.